It's strange how 1 second can split your life into a before and an after. There I was, at my own birthday party, smiling politely through the small talk, when he broke me first, not behind closed doors, but right there, in front of Boston's elite. James slapped me, and for a heartbeat, everything stood still. I cried in silence inside, but outwardly, I laughed. A deep, knowing laugh that made the room shrink back in horror. He never saw it coming. My reaction, he thought I would stay, quietly humiliated, hiding my shame like a dutiful wife. But he forgot. I was nothing to him the moment he raised his hand, and I had spent too many nights plotting my escape to crumble now. That laugh wasn't madness. It was the sound of a trap snapping shut after years of careful planning. The slap echoed louder than any microphone could. You could see the guests stiffen, their pearls clutched, their cocktails paused mid-air. In that instant, the Harringtons' carefully curated image shattered. The truth came out without a single word spoken. You could feel it. A kingdom built on secrets crumbling in real time. And me? I stood right in the rubble, calm and unbreakable. When I found the messages all those years ago, messages between James and Victoria, crafting manipulations, hiding financial fraud, I knew that leaving quietly wasn't an option. She planned it all, molding James into her weapon. But I had a plan too, stitched together in whispers and sleepless nights. That slap, it wasn't the beginning of my fall. It was the gunshot at the start of my freedom race. In the moments after, James stuttered some pathetic apology. His mother, Victoria, swooped in, pretending to console me. Fake tears, trembling hands. Oh, please. Nobody believed her anymore. The facade cracked right down the middle, and everyone could see the rot underneath. My silence then was surgical, slicing through every lie they ever told about who we were. Instead of hiding, I raised my glass, toasted to new beginnings, and walked off the stage they built for themselves. Every step was a hammer blow to their house of cards. He betrayed me, and I was deceived for too long. But now everyone could see it. Every fake smile, every twisted power play, they were naked truths under the harsh lights of reality. I didn't shed a tear. I didn't scream, because my silence was my answer. It spoke louder than any public meltdown ever could. In that moment, I wasn't a victim anymore. I was the reckoning they didn't see coming. And oh, how poetic it felt, knowing revenge had already been set in motion before the first slap even landed. Across the room, I spotted several guests hurriedly texting, whispering, phones recording. Oh well. She exposed him without even lifting a finger. All I had to do was wait. The videos, the whispers, they would be the matches that burned down their empire faster than I ever could alone. The irony was delicious. And James? He looked like a boy who realized he kicked a hornet's nest. He begged her to come back was a fantasy he might have clung to later, but not today. Today, he realized what happens when you underestimate a woman who knows the game better than you ever will, especially one who learned the hard way what betrayal really costs. Funny thing is, when stories of betrayal are told, people expect a villain and a victim, but life's messier than that. Sometimes the one you thought was fragile turns out to be the storm, and this storm, it was just getting started. Because what none of them realized yet was, the slap wasn't the climax. It was just the spark. You know, he thought I would stay trapped in that gilded cage forever, but what he didn't know was that every moment he underestimated me, I was building my escape. She planned it all, not just the party, not just the perfect public moment, but years of quiet, strategic survival. I wasn't just living under their thumb. I was documenting every lie, every fake smile, every stolen dollar. There were nights I cried in silence, staring at spreadsheets, contracts, and old letters, piecing together the empire Victoria built on deceit. Every time he broke me first, I stitched myself back together with even sharper thread. I barely slept some nights, my mind racing with contingency plans, but I knew my silence, my endurance, wasn't weakness. It was ammunition. I wasn't looking for petty revenge. I was preparing for total collapse, a clean takedown where the truth came out so thoroughly that no amount of Harrington wealth could cover it up. If you're stuck in betrayal, take it. From me, revenge is best served with a paper trail. Receipts don't lie, and when it's time, they'll speak louder than any tearful apology ever could. I found hidden bank accounts labeled as consulting fees, fake charities, properties registered under shell companies. Every discovery was another puzzle piece falling into place. I barely recognized the man I once loved. I was deceived not by accident, but by design. That betrayal burns in a way that scrapes your soul clean, but it also wakes you up like nothing else. Stories of betrayal aren't just about heartbreak. They're about survival, learning how to breathe underwater when everyone else is trying to drown you. I kept everything hidden, a burner phone with backups, encrypted cloud files, safety deposit boxes in my name only. If you're ever cornered, like I was, make sure you have a plan so solid it can survive even when you can't. I knew there would be a day when nobody believed her. Victoria, and that I had to be ready. No second chances, no loose ends. Every email I forwarded to myself, every whispered conversation recorded, was a stitch in the parachute I'd need to jump out of their crumbling plane. Survival wasn't just about escape. It was about rebuilding, with proof they couldn't deny. Every smile I wore at their galas, every "yes, ma'am," I whispered to Victoria, was a mask. A shield, because deep down, I was nothing to him anymore, and they were nothing to me either. I wasn't their pawn. I was the queen, patiently moving across the board, trapping them piece by piece, until there was nowhere left for them to go. James, always assumed he never saw it coming, would apply to some dramatic outburst, an emotional meltdown I'd beg forgiveness for. Poor fool. He didn't realize the real damage was already done, quietly, invisibly, with every signature he didn't double-check. Betrayal is an art form, and once you master it, you never play by their rules again. By the time the slap came, the Harringtons had already lost. They just didn't know it yet. Like chess pieces still moving after checkmate, she exposed him and his mother without needing to scream or shout. That's the secret. When you're truly ready, your enemies destroy themselves for you. You just have to be patient enough to let them walk into the fire. And the best part? I wasn't alone anymore. Whispers had already started circling among their inner circle about missing funds, questionable charities, seeds I had planted with precision. It was only a matter of time before those seeds burst into wildfire. And while they scrambled, panicked, and pointed fingers, I was just getting ready to light the next match. The moment his hand struck my cheek, I didn't crumble. I laughed. Not because it didn't hurt, but because it was over. He thought I would stay quiet, humiliated, broken. Oh, how wrong he was. My silence was my answer, but now it was time for the world to hear the real story. The slap wasn't the beginning of my downfall. It was the signal for their empire's implosion. You see, she planned it all down to the second. Hidden among the guests were a few people who weren't just friends or family. They were witnesses, armed with discreet cameras and encrypted live feeds. One tap on my bracelet sent every recording straight to my secure cloud. Right there, in real time, the truth came out for anyone who dared to look. Within minutes, phones started buzzing across the ballroom. Whispers rippled through the crowd like electricity through water. I found the messages, and not just the ones between James and his mistresses. Financial statements, bribery records, whistleblower testimonies. Everything Victoria had buried under decades of fake smiles and blood money, uncovered, exposed, unstoppable. People watched, stunned, as projectors flickered on across the walls. Images and videos played like a horror movie no one could walk out of. He never saw it coming. None of them did. The Harrington name, once spoken with reverence, was now dripping with scandal. Betrayal hung heavy in the air, thick enough to choke on. James stumbled, wide-eyed, trying to snatch the mic from the DJ. Victoria shrieked orders like a feral queen losing her crown. He begged her to come back, to the way things were, to the lies they all lived comfortably inside. But it was too late. I wasn't deceived anymore, and I wasn't the only one who had woken up. This wasn't just personal revenge, it was systemic collapse. Like dominoes toppling, board members, silent partners, and political allies who once smiled for the cameras were now scrambling for the exits. Nobody wanted to be caught in the blast radius. The betrayal ran so deep, it splintered alliances that had been airtight for decades. When she cried in silence all those nights, I wondered if anyone would ever see what they did to me. Turns out, they didn't need to. I just had to show them what they did to themselves. Betrayal has a way of rotting from the inside out. All I had to do was peel back the facade and let the rot spill into the light, and oh, it spilled. Headlines flashed across every major news outlet within hours. Harrington Empire crumbles amid allegations of fraud, abuse. Live feeds showed FBI agents rolling up in black SUVs, sealing doors, seizing documents. He broke me first, but I rebuilt myself into the storm that tore their legacy apart. Funny how quickly powerful people become powerless when their secrets are dragged into daylight. So I showed him the proof, not with shouting or vengeance, but with undeniable evidence, tied up in a bow of poetic justice. Every time they underestimated me was another nail in their own coffin. And just like that, the party ended, not with cheers, but with sirens. As Victoria was led away in handcuffs, her mask finally slipped. She looked straight at me, rage, fear, and disbelief all tangled together. When she was captured, it wasn't just her body they shackled, it was everything she had built. And this was just the beginning. Watching the FBI agents pour into the Harrington estate was like seeing karma arrive dressed in black suits and bulletproof vests. It felt almost surreal. The truth came out louder than any excuse Victoria could ever manufacture. I stood back, sipping my champagne, while her world burned to ash around her. He never saw it coming, and neither did she. Poetic, really. Within minutes, their ivory tower cracked. Agents secured documents, froze bank accounts, and read rights to men who once sneered at waitstaff like they were invisible. Stories of betrayal unfolded in every corner of that cursed mansion. From insider trading to blackmail, every dark secret they hid now screamed for the world to hear. James? He looked like a man caught in a nightmare he couldn't wake up from. He thought I would stay, silent, submissive, scared. But my silence was my answer. It gave me the time to orchestrate this reckoning. I was never nothing. I was deceived. Sure, I was broken. But betrayal, once revealed, has a way of igniting a fire you can't smother. Victoria's screams grew louder as the handcuffs clicked. She didn't understand yet that it was over, that no whispered threats or hush-money deals could save her. She begged. She cursed. She threw everyone under the bus, including her own son. But it didn't matter anymore. Nobody believed her. The walls had ears now, and they were wired to the justice system. One by one, power players scrambled to scrub their names from the Harrington web. Fake smiles vanished. Loyalty disintegrated faster than ice in the sun. Betrayal, it seemed, wasn't unique to me. These people had been betraying each other for years. All it took was a woman with nothing, left to lose, to rip the curtain down. He broke me first, but watching the empire fall showed me how strong I'd become. No weapon is deadlier than a woman who rebuilds herself after betrayal. It was no longer about revenge. It was about survival, dignity, and truth. So I showed him the proof, and the world judged him far harsher than I ever could have. Reporters swarmed the front gates. Cameras flashed like lightning. Every guest at that cursed party would forever be tied to the Harrington scandal. Friends turned into liabilities. Deals evaporated overnight. Partnerships, forged over decades, dissolved. In days, betrayal has a funny way of accelerating decay when the light finally hits it. James sat slumped on the staircase, head in his hands, looking like a boy who'd lost his mother. I almost pitied him. Almost. He begged her to come back, but Victoria could barely save herself now, much less him. Every decision they made, every lie, every manipulation, had finally come home to roost. And me? I didn't say a word. I didn't gloat. I didn't cry. My silence was my answer. It was the loudest thing in that entire collapsing world. They had taken so much from me. My trust, my love, my peace. But they could never take away the truth. And now, it belonged to everyone. As the last police cruiser pulled away and the crowd started to thin, I knew deep down, this wasn't the end of the war. No, this was just the final battle of the first chapter. What came next would demand even more strength, more clarity, and a different kind of courage altogether. The courtroom was colder than I expected. Maybe it was the air conditioning, or maybe it was the weight of decades of stories of betrayal finally surfacing. Sitting there, I watched Victoria Harrington, once untouchable, now just another defendant in a cheap gray suit. She cried in silence, but this time, there was no one left to pity her. When the prosecutor began laying out the case, I felt an odd mix of grief and satisfaction. The truth came out in waves. Financial fraud, psychological manipulation, money, laundering. It was all there. No more whispers, no more gaslighting. I could almost hear Victoria's empire crumbling with every word spoken aloud. She exposed him by trying to save herself, but she only ended up tightening the noose. James barely lifted his head throughout the proceedings. He thought I would stay, maybe even stand by him, but I was nothing to him when it really mattered. He betrayed me, and now he had to sit in the mess he helped create. I found the messages. I found the forged documents. I found everything they thought they'd hidden. They underestimated the woman they tried to erase. When the verdicts rolled out, it was like taking a first full breath after years of suffocating. Victoria got 28 years. 28 years for every lie, every manipulation, every time she told me nobody believed her when she painted me as crazy. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about restoring the balance that betrayal had shattered. James's charges were lighter, mostly because evidence showed he'd been manipulated from a young age. Brainwashed, really. Part of me still mourned the boy he once was before Victoria sculpted him into a weapon. He broke me first, but he was broken long before he ever touched my heart. Healing for him would be a long road, one I couldn't walk with him anymore. I sat through every testimony, every accusation, every humiliating revelation. My silence was my answer when people asked if I was angry, if I wanted vengeance. What I wanted was justice, and justice was already unfolding. Watching Victoria escorted away in cuffs, hearing the gavel slam down, it was a song sweeter than any apology they could have offered. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed, cameras flashing, mics thrust into my face. I simply said, "The truth came out today. No more, no less." It wasn't my job to convince the world of anything anymore. I had done my part. I had fought in silence for years. Now the world could see the carnage he betrayed me for. She planned it all, and by she, I meant myself. I had spent sleepless nights documenting every threat, every insult, every deceit. No one could say I acted out of anger. I acted out of survival. There's a power in calculated patience, in waiting until the scales tip naturally, until the ones who deceived you set their own trap. And though the verdicts brought a strange peace, I knew real healing couldn't be found in a courtroom. Justice punishes the guilty, yes, but redemption, that comes from somewhere deeper, somewhere inside. And that next step, the hardest one, was just beginning to unfold in front of me. Starting over wasn't some grand fireworks moment. It was quiet, almost painfully so. After the dust settled, I realized I could either let stories of betrayal define me, or I could rewrite the narrative entirely. He betrayed me, yes. I was deceived, yes. But betrayal wasn't where my story had to end. It was just where a new beginning could finally take root. I spent weeks alone, sorting through everything. Old emails, legal papers, therapy notes. At first, it felt like digging through rubble after an earthquake, finding fragments of a life I barely recognized. She cried in silence during those nights, but crying wasn't weakness. It was a kind of baptism. I had to let the old pain pour out before anything new could grow. One night, totally out of the blue, the idea struck me. What if I created something powerful out of all this mess? A place for people like me, people who had been silenced, manipulated, trapped. That's when the Cognitive Liberty Legal Foundation was born. It wasn't about revenge. It was about giving a voice to those whose silence was their answer for too long. Setting it up wasn't glamorous. It was long nights, tight budgets, endless paperwork. But every document I signed, every board meeting I fought through, felt like a brick laid in a fortress built from my pain. She planned it all, not just the escape from James's world, but the blueprint for a better future, one where betrayal didn't get the final word. When the first client walked into our tiny office, I barely held it together. She looked so much like me, hollowed out eyes, hope flickering behind walls built out of survival. She told me I was nothing to him, and I smiled because I understood that language fluently. It was like hearing an echo of my own story, but this time, I could help shift the ending. Every time someone said nobody believed her, I pushed harder. I fought in courtrooms. I lobbied lawmakers. I built networks that stretched wider than I ever dreamed. She exposed him, yes, but more importantly, she exposed a system that had kept so many women trapped, invisible, voiceless. The truth came out and it couldn't be buried again. People think revenge is loud and messy. They picture shattered dishes and screaming matches. But real revenge? It's building something beautiful where they tried to bury you. It's succeeding so wildly they can't even say your name without tasting bitterness. He never saw it coming. That I would turn devastation into a legacy. I never forgot James. I never forgot Victoria. But I refused to let them own even a second more of my story. He begged her to come back through lawyers and letters, but I didn't even open most of them. My silence was my answer, my refusal to be dragged back into that web. Some things don't need words. They need distance. The foundation grew faster than I expected. Donors, volunteers, survivors, all weaving a tapestry of healing that stretched far beyond me. I realized then that my pain wasn't wasted. It had been transformed, refined into purpose. It wasn't just about helping others. It was about liberating the parts of myself I'd hidden away for so long. And just when I thought I had rebuilt everything I could, life handed me a curveball, an opportunity to face the past one final time. Not for revenge, not for closure, but for something far deeper. And ready or not, I knew it was a moment I couldn't walk away from. I'll never forget the day James reached out, not with anger, but with something far heavier, regret. He thought I would stay, trapped in that endless cycle, but he never saw it coming that I'd break free so completely. His voice cracked when he said he was in therapy now, trying to understand how he became the man who slapped his wife at her own birthday party. He broke me first, but in some twisted way, he was breaking now too. I didn't rush to meet him. I sat with it, wrestled with it. Part of me wanted to slam the door in his face forever. Another part, the part that had clawed her way through stories of betrayal and revenge, knew this was a chance to do something different. Not for him, for me. Because healing isn't about waiting for apologies. It's about choosing peace, even when the wound still itches. When we finally sat across from each other, it wasn't some dramatic showdown. It was two people, broken in different ways, trying to sift through the wreckage. He whispered, I was nothing to him, speaking about himself and how he was molded by his family's expectations. I saw for the first time not a monster, but a man who had been engineered for cruelty and now didn't know how to undo it. I made it clear she finally left, and she wasn't coming back. Our marriage, whatever remained of it, was over. But forgiveness? That was a different story. Not for him, but for me. Because carrying all that hate would have been like drinking poison and expecting him to die. I wasn't built for bitterness. I was built for rebuilding. It wasn't some movie moment where we hugged and made everything right. No way. Healing doesn't work like that. Instead, I told him I hoped he would find a way to repair himself. Not to win me back, but to become the man he was supposed to be before betrayal poisoned his roots. When she was captured by trauma, she stayed. When she was freed, she soared. I laid out boundaries as clearly as stone walls. No more calls, no more letters. If he truly wanted redemption, it wouldn't be through me. It would be through the life he chose to build now, piece by piece. She planned it all, even her exit from this final conversation, because survival meant controlling the narrative until the very last word. As we parted, he whispered, nobody believed her, talking about his mother's lies, the manipulation they all swallowed for so long. I just nodded. Some battles you don't need to fight anymore. My silence was my answer, steady and unwavering. There's a kind of sacred power in choosing not to explain yourself to those who once demanded your obedience. Walking away that day, I felt lighter. I didn't belong to that past anymore. It was still there, like an old scar on my heart, but it wasn't bleeding anymore. I had turned the page, closed the chapter. The truth came out. And now, finally, I could breathe without the taste of bitterness on my tongue. Funny how betrayal can burn you alive, and yet also forge you into something tougher, something more real. I found the messages. Sure, he betrayed. Me, no doubt. But betrayal wasn't my ending. It was the spark that ignited the fiercest version of me. And now, standing on the other side of all that fire, I realized I was only just beginning, because just around the corner, something even bigger was waiting for me. A movement, a mission, a legacy that would echo louder than any slap, any lie, any betrayal ever could. Starting over wasn't just about getting a new apartment or changing my last name. It was about carving out a life so radically different that even revenge started to feel like an afterthought. She cried in silence for years, but now her voice echoed through every project, every foundation, every courtroom where another victim stood up and said, no more. I wasn't just surviving. I was building something that would outlive every scar they tried to brand me with. Founding the Cognitive Liberty Legal Foundation wasn't part of some grand plan. Honestly, it grew out of pure rage and the desperate need to make meaning out of the madness. I was deceived, yes, but I refused to let that betrayal be the final sentence of my story. If he begged her to come back now, it wouldn't matter. I was no longer reachable by the language of regret. Every time I stood in court, every time I fought for someone whose mind had been twisted by lies and control, I remembered my own battles. I found the messages that blew my world apart, but what I found afterward was even more powerful, a cause worth waking up for. The truth came out not just for me, but for thousands who thought nobody would ever believe them. The irony? The very things they tried to destroy in me, my voice, my power, my fire, became the tools I used to dismantle everything they stood for. She exposed him, and in doing so, she exposed a whole system designed to silence women, manipulate families, and crush anyone who dared to think differently. The empire of betrayal they built fell stone by stone because one woman decided she wouldn't break. I learned fast that betrayal isn't the end. It's the beginning of the greatest kind of power. Wisdom. Real wisdom. The kind you can't fake or fast forward through. The kind that makes you bulletproof in ways people who never faced real darkness could never understand. I wore my scars like armor, and every time someone tried to shame me with my past, I smiled and built something even stronger. He thought I would stay, that I'd be frozen in that moment forever. Instead, I turned that slap into a signal flare, a beacon that guided others out of their own nightmares. Nobody believed her, they once said. Well, guess what? Now, entire courts, entire communities, entire movements stood behind women like her, like me. Healing isn't a straight line. Some days, the memories still sneak up on me out of the blue, a touch on my wrist, a harsh laugh in a crowded room. But instead of shrinking, I let them remind me. He broke me first, but he didn't get to define the last chapter. My silence was my answer then. But now, my voice was the anthem of a revolution. When she was captured by fear, she barely breathed. Now she roared. Now, she dared to build a world where manipulation didn't win, where betrayal didn't silence, where stories of betrayal became stories of rebirth. If that's not revenge, I don't know what is. Sometimes I think about Victoria Harrington, rotting away in prison, still plotting, still cursing my name. And honestly, I hope she does, because every second she spends stewing is a second I spend living. She planned it all, sure, but she didn't plan for my rise. And that's the real legacy, showing the world that even in the ashes of the ugliest betrayal, something breathtaking can grow. And maybe, just maybe, this was never just my story to begin with. Maybe it was the beginning of something so much bigger, something no one, especially them, ever saw coming.